Welcome to Karen's HOA Nightmares. Get ready for the most outrageous, shocking, and downright hilarious tales from the world of homeowners associations. In today's story, Henry Patrick, a former Army Ranger, thought his life on his 47-acre ranch in Tennessee was peaceful, until Karen Laura, the HOA president, orchestrated a fraudulent scheme to force him to sell his property at a fraction of its value. What began as a fake inspection quickly escalated into sabotage, harassment, and intimidation, targeting military veterans for profit. With the help of Kelly Johnson, a sheriff's deputy, and Baxter Patrick, a property lawyer, Henry fought back, exposing a criminal conspiracy that reached far beyond his own ranch. This is the story of one veteran's fight for justice against those who thought they could exploit him, and others like him, for profit. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest hot stories. The pounding on my door at 5 a.m. was deliberate. Heavy boots, the sound of multiple voices, and the scraping of something metallic against wood made my heart race. I could feel my blood run cold as I peered through the curtains. 5 large figures stood in the shadows, their faces hidden. They weren't here for a friendly visit, that much was clear. The way they had positioned themselves around my property told me this was well-planned, coordinated, and professional. Then came the demands that changed everything. But who sent them? And why my ranch? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. At 7 a.m., 5 men in fake security uniforms knocked on my ranch door, claiming they were HOA enforcement officers here for a mandatory inspection. The leader flashed a badge that was clearly wrong. Cheap plastic, incorrect font, definitely fake. "Sir, you need to comply immediately or face legal action," he said, trying to push past me into my home. That's when my Army Ranger training kicked in. Like muscle memory from 1,000 missions. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and sent him to his knees, screaming in pain. His friend tried to swing at me, but big mistake. I ducked under his wild punch, swept his legs out from under him, and watched him crash hard onto the porch, the boards cracking beneath him. The other 3 took off, suddenly remembering they had other places to be, scrambling toward their van like roaches under a bright light. I shouted after them, "Tell Karen Laura her intimidation tactics won't work on a trained soldier." As they sped off, I realized this wasn't some random harassment. They knew too much about my military background, my property, my daily schedule. Someone had planned this operation for months. My 47-acre Tennessee ranch was valued at $450,000, prime development land that someone clearly wanted bad enough to hire fake officers to intimidate me. The next morning, Karen Laura herself appeared at my door, plate of homemade cookies in hand, wearing a politician's smile. "Henry, I'm so sorry about yesterday," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I had no idea about the inspection. As HOA president, I personally apologize for the confusion. Something about her tone set off every alarm bell in my brain. We sat on the porch, and that's when Karen's true intentions started slipping through. "How long have you owned this beautiful property, Henry?" she asked, but her eyes weren't admiring the view. They were calculating. "I heard you served in the Army. Thank you for your service." She said it like it was confirmation of intel she'd already gathered. Then came the invasive questions. "Do you have family who might visit? Children who might inherit someday?" Who asks those kinds of questions during a friendly chat? "Have you considered what this property might be worth in today's market?" There it was, the money question, delivered with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. I felt the red flags rising, one after another. Karen knew the boundaries of my property perfectly, referencing easements I'd never discussed. She casually dropped details about development opportunities in the area, opportunities that hadn't been made public. "Do you always jog at 6 a.m.? she asked with that same fake smile that made my blood run cold. She had been watching me, studying my routines like a predator. She knew things about my neighbors' properties. Details that only someone conducting serious surveillance would know. The year the Henderson house was built, the square footage of the Davis property, things that weren't public record. I glanced at the plate of cookies again, and that's when it hit me. It was a prop. The sweet butter smell barely masked the faint scent of plastic from the file sleeve in her bag. In the military, you learn to respect small details. Karen didn't just know things. She controlled the conversation like a seasoned interviewer. Her eyes never left the property line as she casually mentioned the power line along the tree line, a potential safety issue if someone wanted a reason to take action. I lobbed a question back at her. "You've been here long?" Her smile thinned. "Long enough to care." That's when Kelly Johnson showed up, still in her sheriff's deputy uniform from the night shift. Everything changed in an instant. Kelly took one look at Karen's questions and her cop instincts kicked in. "Ma'am, those sound like pretty specific questions for a neighborly visit," she said, her voice polite but firm. Karen's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "As HOA president, I have legal obligations to ensure community compliance," she snapped, her tone now sharp as glass. Kelly wasn't buying it. She'd been a cop too long to fall for Karen's amateur intimidation tactics. When Karen pulled out what looked like official documents claiming HOA bylaws required property inspections, Kelly immediately recognized them as fake. Real HOA bylaws didn't grant that kind of authority, and Kelly had seen enough forged paperwork in her career to spot them from a mile away. That's when Karen started her psychological warfare campaign. "I'm just concerned about everyone's safety, especially with Henry's military background," she said, making it sound like PTSD was contagious. "Sometimes veterans have adjustment challenges that affect the whole community." The conversation ended with Karen suggesting, "Henry, I hope we can resolve any compliance issues before next week's HOA meeting. It would be easier for everyone if we work together on this." After Karen left, Kelly pulled me aside with a serious expression. "Those weren't just neighborly questions, Henry. Someone's profiling you, and whatever it is, it's not good." Kelly spent the next hour researching recent HOA activities, and what she found shocked us both. There was a troubling pattern. Specific homeowners, mostly veterans, were being targeted. All of them had valuable properties, and all of them had been harassed by fake HOA violations. It turned out Karen wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. She was part of something much darker. As Kelly dug deeper, we realized Karen was running a systematic campaign to acquire veteran-owned properties. She was targeting vulnerable veterans, creating fake HOA violations to force them to sell their homes below market value. That's when the harassment escalated from mere intimidation to outright sabotage. My main water line was severed during emergency maintenance, leaving me without water for 3 days. 12 of my cattle were scattered across the highway after someone mysteriously left the gates open, costing me $500 in emergency veterinary bills. My phone and internet lines were cut during routine tree trimming service. Every incident was designed to push me to the brink, hoping I'd sell my property just to escape the harassment. And then Rick Morrison showed up. He wasn't pretending anymore. He was muscle for hire. The former mall security guard with his criminal record brought 2 associates, Bruno Silva, a former bouncer, and Tommy, an unlicensed contractor. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to intimidate. "Mrs. Laura is offering you $320,000 for your property," Rick said coldly, standing in my living room like he owned the place. "Take the offer or things get complicated." I knew my property was worth $450,000. This was robbery, disguised as a business deal. The legal pressure continued, with official-looking liens being filed against my property for violations that didn't exist. A $12,000 lien for compliance violations and a $8,500 lien for emergency maintenance, and a $15,000 lien for community legal expenses. The total came to $35,500, threatening immediate foreclosure if I didn't pay up within 30 days. This wasn't just harassment. It was financial terrorism. The next escalation came when Karen orchestrated a public meeting, inviting all 47 neighborhood families to listen to her speak. She spread lies about my mental health and suggested that I was a threat to property values. This wasn't just about compliance, it was a character assassination designed to turn my neighbors against me. I knew what they were doing. They were isolating me, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The meeting topic was listed as addressing problematic property owner behavior, making it sound like I was some kind of dangerous criminal instead of a veteran being systematically harassed by criminals. The psychological manipulation reached new lows when Karen convinced vulnerable senior citizens in our community that I was a danger to their safety. 78-year-old Mrs. Henderson started believing I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD who might snap at any moment. Year-old. Mr. Davis became worried that my military training made me unpredictable and potentially violent toward innocent neighbors. An elderly couple started fearing that I might lose control and threaten the entire neighborhood's well-being. Karen was weaponizing their natural concerns about safety to isolate me from any community support. The most damning evidence came when I found fresh survey stakes throughout my land, proving that Summit Development had conducted unauthorized property assessments while planning their development project. The markers indicated they planned to subdivide my ranch into 8 commercial lots with an estimated development value of $3.2 million. Karen's lowball offer of $320,000 would have netted them almost $3 million in a profit from land they were trying to steal through systematic harassment and intimidation. Kelly was facing serious career pressure from her department supervisor, who warned her to avoid civil disputes and focus on real police work instead of what he called neighbor squabbles. But Kelly's training told her this was organized criminal activity, not a civil dispute, and she wasn't about to abandon a fellow veteran to criminals just because her boss didn't understand the situation. Her integrity was going to cost her professionally, but she wasn't backing down. Karen contacted the local newspaper with a story pitch designed to destroy my reputation publicly. Troubled veteran refuses community standards, threatens neighborhood safety. She was trying to control the narrative before I could expose her criminal operation, painting herself as a concerned community leader, dealing with an unstable veteran who refused to follow reasonable rules. The media manipulation was sophisticated and dangerous. I decided to fight back with my own public relations campaign, posting property damage photos on social media with a caption that cut straight to the truth. This is what HOA compliance looks like. Karen Laura's harassment campaign includes property damage and intimidation. The post started getting shared immediately, and I could see Karen's carefully constructed reputation beginning to crack under public scrutiny. Karen's face went white when she saw my social media post getting hundreds of shares. She realized her reputation was crumbling and desperate people do dangerous things. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that overstepped its boundaries? Comment below. Your stories might help other homeowners recognize the warning signs. Rick Morrison returned to my ranch at dawn with his 3-man intimidation crew, claiming they were conducting a final compliance inspection, and I immediately recognized them as the same fake officers from that first morning confrontation. These guys clearly hadn't learned their lesson about tangling with trained military personnel, but I was about to give them a refresher course they wouldn't forget anytime soon. Rick's crew looked more confident this time, probably thinking they had backup and better planning, but they had no idea what kind of tactical preparation I'd been making since our last encounter. Using my Army Ranger training, I transformed my property into a defensive position that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. Security cameras were positioned at all entry points, providing multiple angles of coverage for everything that happened on my land. Motion sensors around the property perimeter would alert me to any unauthorized movement, day or night. I'd prepared non-lethal defensive measures that would stop intruders without causing permanent damage, though I'll admit the temporary pain was going to be memorable. Kelly and Baxter were both on emergency contacts, ready to respond immediately if things escalated beyond my ability to handle alone. We also reinforced the legal side. Baxter sent a chain of custody checklist. I printed it and taped it under the main monitor. Before each watch, I read the time, touched the sync tag, swept a full circle with the lens, and ended with a clear line. No third parties outside frame. Kelly suggested a safety passphrase for phone calls, something harmless that would signal duress if I had to speak under pressure. We picked peach pie in September. I placed the backup mic behind the horse stall because intruders prefer the blind path. The drive was saved to a mirrored SNIAS at Baxter's office through an encrypted link. If someone smashed the box, the copy would live. At the gate, he hung a small sign. Private property, no authority. Do not enter simple words. No threats, only facts. I did not want to fight. I wanted a record. If they crossed the line, the court would see what happened start to finish without commentary. The major confrontation began when Rick's crew attempted forced entry through my front door, apparently thinking they could intimidate me into submission through sheer aggression. I activated my recorded warning system first, giving them every legal opportunity to leave voluntarily. You are trespassing on private property. You have no legal authority here. Leave immediately or face the consequences. When they continued advancing despite the clear warning, I knew they'd made their choice and I was ready to help them live with it. The first intruder got disabled with a joint lock that put him on his knees faster than Sunday prayer, screaming loud enough to wake the dead while I held his arm at an angle nature never intended. The second guy tried to help his buddy but walked straight into a pressure point technique that dropped him like a sack of concrete, twitching on my porch while his nervous system tried to figure out what had happened. The third crew member took one look at his partners writhing in pain and decided discretion was the better part of valor, retreating to their van, while I held the other two in submission holds. The entire encounter was captured on multiple cameras from angles that would make any prosecutor smile. After the confrontation failure, Karen's operation escalated to serious property damage that was clearly designed to bankrupt me through emergency repairs. My septic system mysteriously failed, requiring $8,500 in emergency repairs that couldn't wait because raw sewage was backing up into my house. My solar panel array got damaged by what they claim was a hailstorm despite clear weather, and no reports of hail anywhere in the county. Another $8,000 in replacement costs. My ranch fence got completely destroyed by a runaway truck that somehow managed to hit every support post along 300 YD of fencing without leaving any tire tracks or paint transfer. $25,000 in total damage that insurance was going to fight because of the suspicious circumstances. Baxter launched our legal counterattack with a federal lawsuit that would make Karen and her crew wish they'd picked an easier target. Criminal harassment under color of law carried serious federal penalties. Intentional infliction of emotional distress would cost them financially, even if they avoided criminal charges. Property damage and conversion charges would make them pay for every dollar of harm they'd caused. RICO conspiracy charges would treat their operation like the organized crime enterprise it really was, with penalties that could destroy their lives completely. Karen's public relations war went into overdrive when the local newspaper ran an article titled, "Troubled Veteran Threatens Community Safety," painting me as an unstable menace to peaceful neighborhood life. But I had evidence on my side, and truth has a way of cutting through propaganda like a hot knife through butter. I released complete security footage online showing Rick's crew engaging in criminal behavior, while I responded with measured, professional self-defense techniques. The video evidence was so clear that public opinion shifted dramatically in my favor once people could see the truth for themselves. The emergency HOA meeting became a battlefield where Karen tried to present me as dangerous and unstable, while I played security footage that showed exactly who the real criminals were. Several neighbors who had been influenced by Karen's poison campaign suddenly realized they'd been manipulated by a master con artist who'd been playing them like puppets. The vote to remove Karen from the HOA presidency was scheduled for the following week, and she could see her power base crumbling like a house built on sand. Kelly provided official police reports documenting every incident of harassment, property damage, and criminal trespass by Rick's crew, creating an official record that would support our federal case. Despite facing career pressure from her superiors, Kelly's integrity wouldn't let her abandon a fellow veteran to organized criminals who were using fake legal authority to steal property. Her reports were professional, detailed, and devastating to Karen's claims of legitimacy. The community was starting to split into two camps: those who still believed Karen's lies about veteran mental health issues, and those who were beginning to understand they'd been living next to a criminal operation disguised as community governance. Property owners started asking uncomfortable questions about HOA finances, wondering where their dues had been going and whether Karen had been stealing from the community fund for years. Media interviews gave me platforms to warn other veterans about property fraud schemes and help them recognize the warning signs before losing their homes. Connections with other victimized veterans nationwide created a network of witnesses and evidence that would support federal prosecution. Templates for fighting HOA abuse were distributed to veteran organizations, giving families tools to protect themselves from similar attacks. Kelly Johnson received official recognition for her investigative work. Despite the career risks she'd taken to help expose federal crimes disguised as community governance, her superiors finally understood that she'd been investigating organized criminal activity, not interfering in civil disputes, and her dedication to protecting a fellow veteran earned commendations that advanced her career, rather than destroying it. The Sheriff's Department issued public statements supporting her actions and promising increased attention to veteran protection cases. Federal investigators discovered that Summit Development Corporation had been operating similar schemes in 12 states, generating over $30 million in fraudulent property acquisitions by targeting veterans who were isolated from legal support. The company's stock price crashed when the investigation became public, and executives faced federal charges that would send them to prison for decades. Karen's scheme wasn't just local crime. It was part of a national conspiracy to defraud veterans of their property rights. Community support rallied around my cases, Neighbors apologized for believing Karen's lies and demanded accountability for the criminal organization that had been operating in their midst. The neighborhood voted unanimously to remove Karen's entire criminal organization from HOI leadership and elect veteran-friendly representatives who would protect property rights rather than destroy them for profit. With Karen exposed and Rick cooperating, I thought the worst was over. But federal investigators had just discovered something that would change everything. This conspiracy went far beyond our small Tennessee community. Federal investigators had uncovered a criminal conspiracy so vast and systematic that it made Karen Laura's local operation look like amateur hour compared to the national network of veteran targeting that had been operating across 12 states for over 5 years. The FBI discovered that my case in Tennessee was just one tentacle of an organized crime enterprise that had successfully stolen properties worth over $30 million from veterans who had trusted their communities to protect them, not prey on them like vultures circling wounded soldiers. Karen's arrest at Nashville International Airport was the kind of dramatic scene that usually only happens in movies, complete with federal marshals, fake passports, and suitcases full of cash that proved her guilt better than any testimony could have managed. She was carrying $180,000 in cash stolen directly from HOA community accounts, apparently planning to disappear to Costa Rica where extradition would be difficult, and her stolen money could buy a comfortable lifestyle. Her fake passport identified her as Catherine Morrison with a completely fabricated background, and documents found in her luggage showed planned real estate, investments in Central America, funded entirely by money stolen from the veterans she'd been systematically destroying for profit. The federal task force formed specifically for veteran protection cases began coordinating investigations across multiple states, and what they found was absolutely staggering in its scope and cruelty. 47 veteran families had been identified as victims of Karen's organization across the Southeast, with total financial losses exceeding $12 million in stolen property value. Summit Development Corporation's scheme had been operating since 2019, targeting veterans with valuable properties in growing suburban areas where development profits would be maximized. Each case followed Karen's exact playbook: harassment through fake HOA authority, property damage to create financial pressure, isolation from community support, then forced sales at below-market prices. My neighborhood underwent a complete transformation that proved how quickly a community can heal once criminal influences are removed, and people understand they've been manipulated by professional con artists. An emergency HOA vote removed Karen's entire corrupt board of directors, replacing them with honest neighbors who actually cared about community welfare rather than personal profit. The new veteran-friendly leadership immediately returned all stolen HOA funds to community improvement projects instead of criminal enterprises. Property values increased dramatically once the artificial pressure from Karen's harassment campaigns was eliminated, benefiting every homeowner who had been unknowingly victimized by her schemes. Federal court proceedings delivered the kind of comprehensive justice that victims of organized crime rarely get to see, with restitution that would make every veteran victim whole again financially and emotionally. Tom Morgan got his $450,000 Marine family property returned along with full compensation for the financial losses he'd suffered during Karen's harassment campaign. Bill Patterson's Air Force pension home was restored to him with $380,000 in restitution damages for the illegal foreclosure that had destroyed his retirement security. Dave Miller received his Army Memorial property back along with $425,000 in compensation for the forced sale that had devastated his family's financial stability. I received $450,000 for my property's full market value, plus $125,000 in punitive damages for the months of harassment, intimidation, and property damage I'd endured. Summit Development Corporation's complete collapse was swift and merciless once federal prosecutors finished documenting their criminal enterprise, seizing assets worth over $45 million that would be distributed to veteran victims nationwide. The company's chief executive officer received an 18-year federal prison sentence and forfeited his entire personal wealth, including luxury homes, investment accounts, and business interests that had been built on stolen veteran properties. All fraudulently acquired veteran properties were immediately returned to their original owners or their families, with development projects permanently halted and the land restored to its natural state wherever possible. Kelly Johnson's career advancement came through official recognition of her excellence in criminal investigation, earning promotion to detective lieutenant and authorization to create a statewide veteran protection unit that would prevent similar crimes from ever happening again. Her training program for recognizing veteran fraud schemes became mandatory for law enforcement officers across Tennessee, and she became an expert witness in similar cases nationwide. Kelly's integrity in risking her career to protect a fellow veteran became a model for ethical law enforcement that inspired policy changes throughout the criminal justice system. Legal precedent established by my case created new federal protections that would shield veterans from property fraud for generations to come, transforming my personal nightmare into lasting systemic change. The Veterans Property Protection Act passed Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support, creating federal oversight of HOA targeting practices and criminal penalties, specifically designed to deter veteran exploitation. A $100 million federal fund was established to assist veteran fraud victims with legal representation and financial recovery. Military-based transition programs now include mandatory warning sessions about property scams, ensuring that every veteran knows how to recognize and resist these criminal operations. Community healing in our neighborhood became a model for how communities can recover from organized crime once they understand how they've been manipulated and victimized. A public apology ceremony honored my service and acknowledged how terribly the community had treated me, based on Karen's lies and manipulation. A veterans memorial was dedicated in our community park, recognizing all military families and their sacrifices for our freedom. Annual veteran appreciation events were established to ensure that military families would always be welcomed and supported rather than targeted for exploitation. Karen's former house was purchased by the Restitution Fund and donated to a homeless Marine family, transforming a symbol of criminal greed into hope for veterans in need. The ripple effects of justice spread far beyond our small Tennessee community, as media coverage inspired other veteran communities to report similar schemes leading to investigations and prosecutions nationwide. Congressional hearings examined how federal contractors had been allowed to target veterans with impunity for years. Military advocacy organizations received increased funding to protect veteran property rights. Law enforcement agencies received specialized training in recognizing organized veteran targeting schemes. Educational programs were developed to warn veterans about property fraud during their transition to civilian life. Justice had been served completely and comprehensively, but the most satisfying moment was still to come. Watching Karen face the consequences of targeting the wrong veteran. If you know a veteran who has been taken advantage of, share this story. Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to protect an entire community. The federal courthouse in Nashville was packed with veteran supporters, family members, and media representatives when Karen Laura faced sentencing for her systematic campaign of targeting and exploiting the men and women who had served our country with honor and distinction. 12 years in federal prison was exactly what she deserved for conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, and targeting protected classes. Congressional testimony helped lawmakers understand how criminals were exploiting veterans, leading to bipartisan legislation that created federal protections and penalties specifically designed to deter veteran targeting. Over 347 veterans received direct assistance fighting property fraud attempts after learning about successful resistance strategies from my case. Educational legacy from my story reached millions of military families through mandatory training programs at retirement seminars, documentary film coverage that warned about property scams, and case studies and military justice courses that prepared veterans for civilian life challenges. Prevention efforts based on my experience saved an estimated $300 million in veteran property theft by teaching military families recognition and resistance techniques before they became victims of criminal schemes. Federal veteran protection systems that resulted from my case created permanent safeguards against exploitation with databases monitoring HOA actions nationwide and rapid response protocols for reporting targeting attempts. The $100 million federal fund for veteran fraud victims ensured that legal representation and financial recovery would always be available to military families facing property theft. Early warning systems helped veterans recognize criminal patterns before losing their homes to organized crime. Backstore Patrick Veterans Property Law Firm had grown into a national practice specializing in military family protection, maintaining a 97% success rate in defending veteran property rights against criminal schemes. Pruno legal defense funds ensured that financial barriers would never prevent veterans from fighting back against property fraud. Training programs for attorneys specializing in veteran protection created legal expertise, networks covering the entire country. Kelly Johnson, detective. Career had reached its pinnacle with the Tennessee Veteran Protection Unit covering the entire state, training hundreds of officers in fraud recognition and preventing millions of dollars annually in veteran property crime. Her expertise in HOA abuse investigation made her a national consultant who helped other states develop their own veteran protection programs. The most satisfying part of victory wasn't the money, the recognition, or even the justice. It was proving that targeting veterans for exploitation was the biggest mistake Karen Laura and her criminal organization ever made. We protect our own, we never forget those who try to harm us, and we always fight back harder than criminals expect. They thought my military service made me an easy target. They learned that our training, our brotherhood, and our dedication to protecting each other make us the wrong people to victimize. This is Echo Stories, where real people share real experiences that change lives.